The water rises, you build the wall. Hoping the crowd screams out, screaming your name. Hope if everybody runs, you do sustain. Hope that you fall in love, and it hurts so bad. Only way you can know, give all you have. And I hope that you don't suffer, but take the pain. Hope when the moment comes, you say, I did it all. I did it all. Every second, this world could give so many places, the things that I did. There was every broken home. I swear I live. Hope that.
Hello, everybody. It is so awesome to see so many of you here. Yay. So before we get started, I just want to make sure, can everybody hear me okay? And can everybody see the screen okay? I want to make sure all of that is perfect before we get started. So if you can hear me, just type a big ol' yes into the chat. And then I also would love to know how long you guys have been traveling for and what you are most excited to be learning about today. So if you can hear me, just start putting that stuff in the chat. I see Mary Margaret said yes, Nancy said yes, Sarah and Kim and Anna. Yes, so many yeses. Woo, perfect. I'm so glad you all are here. And then as we start talking today also, feel free to use that chat box to ask me questions along the way. At the very end of this, we will have a question and answer session. But if you have questions that come up about certain topics, I'll try to answer some of them while I'm doing these slides as well. All right, Teresa, I'm on week 3 of my first assignment. Very cool. How is that going for you? The first one is always so fun. Karen's about to travel for the first time. Birdie, hey Birdie, you've been traveling since June. Taylor, yes. Marlo, hi Marlo, good to see you. You're not traveling quite yet. We'll get you traveling soon. Nancy, new. You're hoping to start traveling next summer. Shelby, you and your boyfriend just started and finishing your first assignment. How cool to travel with your boyfriend. I love that. Sarah has not traveled yet, and Janice and Michelle. Tassie, week 1. Cool. Andrea, I have not started yet. In fact, we just had a chat with the recruiter an hour, not even an hour ago, recommended from me. Yay, I'm so glad. Cool. Well, it looks like a lot of you are here. So, perfect. All right. So, you are about to learn so many cool things and very quickly. We're going to go through some pretty big topics pretty fast. You're going to get a great overview of the whole industry right now. So I want you to get the very most value you can out of this hour or so. So try to grab a pen and paper and close down the distractions, and you will definitely learn a lot. Okay, so you are in the right place right now if you are or you want to be a healthcare traveler. So nurses are welcome, and therapists are welcome, and respiratory therapists and physician assistants. Anybody that wants to learn more about the healthcare traveling industry, you're in the right place. And if you want to learn it from someone who has done it and is actually doing it. I am about to be on my, Jennifer says no sound. Shelby said our video and sound went out. Is anyone else? I have sound. Nancy can see and hear, no problem. Okay, so some people do not have sound and some people do, it sounds like. Mary can hear. Sarah can still hear. Heather can still hear. So Jennifer and Shelby, how's it going for you? Sarah has sound and video. Okay. Oh, Gail says good now. Okay, so it looks like it is. Shelby refreshed, and we have it again. Okay, awesome. We'll keep going. All right, so I am Laura. I'm going on my 6th year of traveling, which is unreal. And real quickly, I'm going to take these slides off so you can see my face for a second. Hello, guys. This is going to be the person that's talking. Most of this presentation will be on slides, so I can write stuff down and help you learn. But this is my face. I'm Laura. I'll tell you a little bit of my story real quick. So I'm an occupational therapist, and I'm one of those crazy therapists that has actually traveled since I graduated. So I have actually never had a permanent job. I have always been traveling. And what I always knew is that I wanted to be an occupational therapist, and I wanted to move to Australia. That was all I cared about when I was in grad school. I went to grad school in a town called Lubbock, Texas. Have any of you guys ever been to Lubbock, Texas? It is a small city, and I was there for undergrad, and it's one of these Texas towns that people actually legitimately wear cowboy hats and cowboy boots. And I had so much fun for undergrad, but then when it came time for grad school, I was like, oh my God, I do not want to be here for 2.5 more years. I've seen this town for 4 years. I'm ready to see more of the world. But I also knew that Texas Tech had a great OT program. And so I was torn. And so what I did is I made a promise with myself. And I said, okay, Laura, you're going to stay in Lubbock for 2.5 more years, but then you're moving to Australia. You're going to do it. And so my best friend even bought me this huge map of Melbourne, Australia, the place I knew I was going to live, and I framed it over my bed, and I looked at it every night. And was like, I'll be there right when I graduate. But then what happened, at the very last few months of OT school, I went to the big conference they do for occupational therapists called AOTA. And I go and I get the pamphlet when I get there. And there is a booth in the back that is from Australia. And I was like, oh my God, Australia is here. And I run to the back and I was like, I'm moving to Australia. Nice to meet you. I'm Laura. I'll be there in a few months. And they were like, oh, it's great to meet you, but you can't come in a few months. You have to work for about a year before you can come to Australia. And in all those nights that I was looking at my map, I never actually did the research and realized I couldn't just go straight to Australia. So bummed, I'm walking down the pathway, and there's all these other booths around, and one of the other booths was a recruitment company for traveling therapy. I had never heard of it before, and they start telling me all these things about we pay for your housing, you only commit to 3 months at a time, you could work with us and go see the country and then go to Australia afterwards. So completely sold, completely excited, and I did. I jumped right in. But the other side to that is 5 or 6 years ago, there was not nearly as many forums or as resources for me to understand how the industry worked. So every bit of information I got was from my recruiter, who I trusted completely. He was so nice. He felt like such a good friend. And it wasn't until years later that I realized all these areas that he hadn't been completely honest and he hadn't guided me in the best way possible. So now, 6 years later, I'm so happy to see all the forums that are out there, and I'm excited to be a part of the puzzle and helping you have a really good experience. So now I'm going to turn my face off, and we're going to dive right in. So let me share these slides again. Okay, so what we are going to be learning today, we're going to be learning how the industry works. We're going to get the inside scoop on all things money. So you're going to learn what bill rates are, what pay rates are, how to use that knowledge to help you negotiate and make more money. You're going to learn the tax rule that you have to know. And this is something that I did not know when I was starting out, but it's something you really, really need to know in this industry. And we're also going to learn how you find your perfect recruiter and perfect company, and plus the red flags to watch out for. How does that sound? Okay, and I was just looking at your chats. It looks like most people have sound, and it's working. Let me know if it cuts out anymore. And welcome all the new people that are here. Okay, and then plus, if you stay till the very end, this will be about an hour. If you stay till the very end, we're going to have a live question and answer session. And then I also have a free gift for you guys that will help you guys on your travels. All right, so a quick overview of how this industry works. Okay, so first of all, there are hospitals and different clinics that hire travelers, us, when they need a temporary fill-in for staffing needs. There's all kinds of reasons that someone could need a temporary fill-in. Someone could be going on a maternity leave. They could just have a huge influx in patients and need to fill a spot for a short amount of time. So we're kind of like a Band-Aid that goes in and helps out, typically for about 3 months at a time, to help these hospitals when they really need help. So these hospitals or the outpatient clinics or the home health clinics, whoever needs us, they're going to go through a middleman, an agency. And this agency, which we know of as our recruiters, our recruitment agency, they're the middlemen who they're going to go through to find us, which saves them time. A good thing to know, which I think most people do know, is that we cost hospitals and clinics a lot more money than they pay for their permanent staff. And so they typically really, really need us when they're willing to get a traveler to come in. And then the recruiter will come to us with these job needs from all over the nation. There's jobs in all 50 states, and then we pick where we want to go. 13 weeks is the standard. So there are going to be like crisis rates and different things that are not 13 weeks, but we're going to talk about what's typically standard in this industry today. So 13 weeks, about 3 months is standard, but you can extend if you like the assignment and then also the hospital likes you. And then number 7 is important. You must have a tax home that you pay rent and mortgage at to be considered a traveler. So yes, this typically means you're going to be paying rent or mortgage in 2 separate places. Okay, so let's talk about what makes a good fit. And honestly, I almost hate talking about this topic because I feel like people sometimes talk themselves out of traveling because suddenly they'll let fear get in the way. And they'll be like, oh, you know what, maybe I'm just not adaptable enough, or maybe I should work for this much longer to really get my clinical skills intact. But really it's just fear, because it is pretty scary when you put yourself out there to travel. But I will go over these traits that definitely are going to be helpful to you on your journey. But you all have to promise to remember that these traits are learned skills. And as you travel, you're going to get bolder and more confident and more open-minded. And you'll grow so much. So don't let this scare you out of traveling if you really, really, really want to. All right, so the first one is adaptability. So you are going to need to be adaptable as a traveler because things do change at the last minute a lot. And the way you're going to really enjoy traveling is if you just embrace this and just kind of trust the journey and let go of needing to control everything that's going to happen next. Because sometimes contracts do get canceled, and sometimes jobs end up not being in the exact place that you were hoping they would be. And then sometimes you'll walk into your housing and it's going to look a little bit different than it did on Craigslist. So it's a very good skill to be able to be adaptable and also just to know how to laugh and roll with it and know that it is a journey. And Gail says, more fear this time than when I went traveling 10 years ago. Interesting, Gail. Yes, I love that. You're going to learn so much. I'm excited for you. The next one is open-mindedness. So I love travel personally because every place that you go to is going to have its own special energy and its own culture. And when you have this open-mindedness and you open your mind and your heart and you experience all these people and the places, that is truly where the magic happens in this industry. To me, the magic is in experiencing so much in this world and living bigger and bolder. And yes, we do make more money, but really I think the magic is when you open yourself up to these different, really awesome cultures. Another big thing about open-mindedness is when you go into a hospital or a new place that you're working, don't try to change their systems. Go in there with a heart that is just there to help and go in ready to learn and grow and learn a new system. Because just think about it from their viewpoint. You might come from a whole other hospital. You might walk in and be like, oh my gosh, if they would just do this system, it would be so much easier for them. But they probably have a huge census, and the last thing they want is someone to come in who's only there for 3 months and try to change everything. So just go in, use their systems. If they ask for help, of course, then you can step up and help. But the fastest way, I think, for people to not enjoy working with you as much is if you go in and try to tell everybody how they're wrong because you saw it differently somewhere else, even if it's true. Confidence, which goes right along with solid clinical skills and ethical boundaries. So in traveling healthcare, you are going to be expected to hit the ground running. So like I said on a previous slide, these hospitals are paying a lot of money for us, a lot more than they would typically pay for someone. And so they are going to want us to be productive pretty quickly. So you can expect shorter orientations. And I know for me as a therapist, I get my list of patients to see typically by the second half of the first day. And so with that, especially if you're someone that is a new graduate or someone that really does not have as much experience, it is going to be really important for you to really assess where your skill levels are and have a mentor, someone you feel safe to call when you're not sure about what to do with the patient or if what someone's asking you to do is the right thing to do. I can say as I traveled as a very new grad, and I did have a mentor that I called on every assignment when I had a question. He was an old professor of mine. And in my second assignment that I got, it was at a nursing home. And I work 8-hour days as a therapist. And so there's 480 minutes in an 8-hour day. And this assignment would hand us our patient list and give us over 1,000 minutes that we were supposed to treat patients with a day. And that was back when you could do group assignments. But I was so fresh out of school and everybody else was doing it. And I remember just wanting to please my boss and wanting to do such a good job, but also knowing like you cannot give great treatment this way and there's no way this could be ethical. And so because I had that mentor that I was able to listen to my gut and call my mentor and get confirmation that that was just absurd, that gave me the courage to say no, which is really, really important. And then that self-motivation to learn, knowing that no one's really holding your hand on this journey. So if you are in a place that you're not as familiar with, be ready to go home on some nights and study up on these diagnoses and these patients that you don't know as well, because you're going to teach yourself those things. All right, let's talk about why do people travel? Why is it so, so amazing? All right, first of all, show me the money. Yes, the money can be great. And I will go into why it can be great when we start talking about the bill rates. But the money is definitely better than a permanent job. But at the same time, I will say boldly and proudly, do not travel if that is the only reason you want to travel, because it does not add up to as much as a lot of the agencies will market to get you to call them. But it is very good. Just make sure it's not the only reason you're traveling. Number 2, you get to explore new clinical settings. I know for me as a therapist, I have worked in almost every single setting now. And I now absolutely love settings that I never even dreamed that I would want to work in at all. So you really get a chance to see more patient populations and different kinds of management styles. And that is really cool when you're trying to figure out where your passion is. Adventure and self-growth go hand in hand. Learning by adventure is just the best. So what I'll say about this is if you're going to travel, actually travel. Do it right. Go out there and explore and try the new foods and befriend the locals. And if you're traveling alone, awesome. I completely encourage traveling alone. But if you do it, go out and be brave. Learn to go out by yourself and meet people and challenge yourself. What I love is that every place you go is a brand new white blank page that you can be exactly the person you want to be. There's no expectations holding you back, and it is the most wonderful chance to experience this world and challenge yourself in such a beautiful way. And what is awesome is if you hate it, no problem. It's just 13 weeks and then you can go back home, but you will not regret trying. And Teresa said she lost sound. Did anybody else lose sound? You guys let me know. Gail said her first travel job was 6 months ago. Let me know if any of the rest of you lost sound. I'm sorry that it keeps cutting out on some people. Other reasons that people love to travel is not having the politics. Nope, no, no. Does that mean nope, you can't hear me, or does that mean you can hear me? I'm going to get into chat real quick. No, but there's a button at the bottom that says to reconnect if you have problems. Yes, we can hear you. I can hear you. Okay, gotcha. No more politics after the job can be incredible. I absolutely love the fact that I can go into a job, be friendly, and be super helpful, but I don't have to get dragged into gossip and the politics because I am only there for 13 weeks. And so I just get to be this really fun, bubbly, excited traveler, but I don't have to worry about whatever politically is going on with the management of the job. I don't have to worry about that. And then my very favorite is the flexibility and the time off. I definitely take advantage of this. For me, because the money can be so awesome if you do it right, you can work less time and then make the same amount as your permanent peers in the same amount of time. So I personally would take 2 months off every year, and in that time I would actually go backpack or visit another country, or sometimes just get more time with my family. So what's cool is literally for you guys, whatever it is that you would dream of doing, if you had 2 months off in a row, you can do. I think that's amazing. And I would love to hear what that would be for some of you guys. I think that would be really fun. What would you do if you literally had 2 months off in a row? All right, but let's talk about why it's not always sunshine. So you do have to hit the ground running like we talked about. In permanent jobs, a lot of times you do get a much better orientation, but they do expect you to be productive very quick in travel jobs. You don't get paid time off and you don't get sick leave. And there are going to be times that you're sick. And we are going to take time off in between jobs to travel or to do things. And if that happens, you just do not get paid for those days. Housing can be time consuming to find if you're not going to take the company's housing. And then there's a flip side to that. If you do take the company housing, it can be easier, but most likely you're not going to make as much money. But it can be time consuming, especially if you're not extending and you really are traveling every 13 weeks. That is a lot of time on Craigslist. Jobs do get canceled. You don't have a whole lot of job security. I will say jobs don't get canceled all the time. My jobs have only been canceled one time actually in the whole 5 years I've traveled, but it does happen. Phone interviews is typically the way that you're going to interview for your jobs. And the thing about phone interviews is it's going to be on you to really ask the right questions and figure out the expectations of this placement. I did not know that starting out. My very first phone interview, I was nervous and excited, and the person called me, and I was so ready with my resume in front of me and had all the right words to say, and the interview lasted all of like 5 minutes. And they didn't ask me anything about my clinical skills. And when I got off the phone, I was like, oh my God, they hated me. Like, that was horrible. But then 10 minutes later, my recruiter called me and was like, all right, they offered you the job. Do you want the job? And I was like, wait, what? I don't even know anything about the job. And very quickly I realized, oh, right, like I have to pretty much lead a lot of these phone interview conversations and have the questions to ask to make sure this is a job I would want to spend 13 weeks at. So it really is more on you in these phone interviews to get those expectations straight. And then health insurance and 401k benefits. That's something that we can get at permanent jobs. So yes, we do get that when we do travel assignments. You will be offered health insurance with all of these companies. But the thing is, to really get the most opportunity and to get the best pay rates, you're going to want to work with more than one agency at once. And it does suck having to switch health insurances every time you have to switch an agency for a job. Not to mention when you take time off in between, all of a sudden you don't have health insurance anymore in between, and it always made me uneasy. So I personally do the Affordable Care Act, and that works really well for me. But I'm also single and don't have a family. And I have heard it can be quite expensive for some people. But that's how I personally handle that. And then when I do take jobs with companies, I get paid a few more dollars an hour because I'm not taking their health insurance. So some companies will do that. And then same with the 401k benefits. There are companies that offer great benefits, but there's a vesting period. So you would have to stay with one company for maybe a year to get vested and actually get those benefits where they match you. And that will limit you in being able to get the most opportunities for jobs and also limit you in getting maybe the best negotiations and pay. Oh, good, you guys wrote some stuff. Traveled to Australia and Europe for Jerry and Jennifer. Australia. Guys, Australia was so fun. I did end up living there for a year. Dawn would spend her summers at home. Very cool. Andrea, definitely visit some new countries and spend time at home. Shannon would do a pilgrimage in Europe. Birdie, ooh, an Iceland trip, Birdie, cool. I love it. You guys are very adventurous like I am. Okay, let's talk about the tax home rule. I actually love talking about this rule because it's so important to me that everyone knows this. I think because it's one of the things I didn't understand when I started, so it's really important to me that new travelers do understand this. It's something that a lot of recruiters, way too many recruiters, either forget to mention or they just really don't know this, honestly. So here's how it works. If you have a tax home, then you can get tax-free stipends. Yay for money. If you don't have a tax home, your money will be taxed. You can't get tax-free stipends. So whether or not a healthcare traveler qualifies to receive our tax-free stipends depends on if they are working away from their tax home. So let's dive into that just a little bit. All right, so there are 3 things that help us determine, do you have a tax home? Number 1, you need to work and make most of your income from one location. So if you guys are really traveling, most of the time you are not going to have one location you make most of your money from because we keep bouncing around. So most people do not qualify for this one. Usually if you're a traveler, you would have 2 and 3. And in order to have a tax home rule, you have to have at least 2 of these 3 things. So 2, the living expenses are duplicated. So this means that you actually have to pay rent somewhere and then travel away from home and far enough away from home that you actually need to stay the night. And so you're actually paying 2 times. And that's when the IRS and the government says, okay, they're traveling away from home from work, so we'll give them a tax-free stipend for their housing and their meals and incidentals. We'll go a little bit more into how that works. I'll answer the question is if you can use your mom's house or a friend's house and rent a room from them. On the next slide, we'll talk about that. And then number 3, you cannot abandon your home. So the things that the IRS looks for this is, do you have your driver's license in your home address? Is your voter's card there? Is your vehicle registered there? Is your mail still going to your home? Do you list that as the home in your taxes that you do? Do you have a bank account somewhere in the town that you live in? Do you still have ties to the community? So when you go home, do you have family and relatives and maybe even a church and different events that you would go to when you go home? And then you also just literally need to go home sometimes. You can't completely abandon your home and never go back. Okay, so here's some questions that I get a lot about tax homes. So how far away do you actually have to go? So some agencies will say this thing and say, if you just go 50 miles away, you're good. Then you can get these tax-free stipends. I was definitely told that by a lot of recruiters in my day. But that is not true. That's not actually written anywhere. It's just that some agencies, recruitment agencies, use that rule. But it's not an IRS rule. What the IRS wants to know is that you are actually living or working far enough away that you cannot commute to and from your house. And so you have to have a different home. That is pretty much what it is. There's no 50-mile rule. It's just actually literally being so far away you can't reasonably commute back and forth. Can you use your mom and dad's house or your best friend's house and rent out a room? Yes, absolutely you can. So if you're going to do that, what you need to do is actually pay them what a fair market value for that room would be. So you can go on Craigslist and look up how much does a room typically go for in this area. And then you'd be like, okay, cool. It goes for, let's say, $300 for a room or $400, whatever it could be. And so then you would write up an actual lease, and you and your mom and dad or you and your friend would sign this lease and say, this is how much I'm going to pay, and this is my room. And then at the very end of the year, your friend or your mom and dad need to actually claim that amount of money on their taxes to say they made income from you. And if you do that and you pay them by a check or some way to leave a paper trail that you can prove you're paying for this, then you were good. How long can you stay in one region? So you can stay in one area as a traveler for less than a year. Once you hit a year mark, all of a sudden that place that you're working in becomes your new tax home. And so make sure if you extend at a place that you really, really love, you're not extending past a whole year, because then suddenly that place becomes your tax home. And then what is a region anyway? So like for me, right now, I am in New Hampshire. And I am about 45 minutes away from Boston. And so let's say I had been working in New Hampshire for 3 assignments. And I was like, oh man, like I'm about to hit my 1-year mark. I need to change regions. I could not go work in Boston next because I could reasonably commute to Boston from New Hampshire. I don't have to change the house that I'm living in. Those are both commutable distances. So Boston, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire, where I live, are both within one region. So a region is not necessarily a state. It's just that same thing about, do I need to actually move to go to the next region? All right, let me know if you guys have any questions about that. All right, let's move right into your pay. So free housing, free license, free move, free CEUs. We'll give you free paid time off. But do not be fooled. Agencies will use a lot of awesome words to get you to think that they are the best and they have the best benefits. And so you will hear this word free a lot in our industry. But because you came here and took this webinar, you will know better than to fall for that, because free is just marketing. Nothing is actually free. So let's talk about how money is done anyway, and then we can understand this free thing a little bit better. So how it works is a hospital needs a traveler. So they're going to submit, typically they're going to submit their bill rate to the agency, to our recruiter. So the bill rate is how much the hospital is willing to pay you per hour of your time. So whatever that bill rate is, that hourly bill rate, multiplied by how many hours you're contracted to work, that's going to equal your total revenue, everything you'll make in that 13 weeks. Okay, so that is this huge pot of money, right? The bill rate times those hours, huge pot of money, total revenue. So then your agency is going to take money out of that huge bucket of money for their own profit and to pay their overhead and to pay for their pens and papers and running their program. And then what's left over after that, that is considered your pay rate. That's what I make and I get to take home. So agencies will take different profit margins. Some agencies take 15, some agencies take 25%. And a lot of different things will go into how much money of that bill rate they will take. So we'll just do the high average and say this agency took 25% of this huge bill rate. So then what's left over is our 75% that we're going to make for working. And that is our pay rate. And so everything, most everything that these agencies are saying is free is really coming out of your 75%, your pay bucket. So free really is just a marketing term, so don't get swept away by it. That really is your money. Okay, so what goes into your 75%, your bucket of money? First of all, we have the base rate. Now the base rate is taxable money. And this needs to be around $20 an hour. I will say that is my opinion. No one says that. It's not written in black and white anywhere. Everyone has their own opinions about this. I personally feel like between $18 and $20 an hour is what I'm comfortable with based on what I've learned from tax experts. And the reason for that is because what the IRS does say is that an employee should be paid a taxable wage that is in line with what the professional could reasonably expect to make without tax-free stipends. So there are some companies out there that go very, very low. They go $10, $12, $14 an hour. And I personally just stay away from those companies altogether because I don't feel like any nurse out there or any therapist out there is going to be making $14 an hour. And so to me, that's clearly not the IRS rules. The other stuff that goes into your pay rate is going to be your housing stipend. That money is tax-free. So you have a choice here. You can either take that housing stipend and go find your own house, or you can actually have the company find your house for you, but then you don't get that tax-free stipend. The one way that a lot of times we end up making pretty good money is that we'll take the housing stipend, but we'll find a place to live that is cheaper than the housing stipend we get. So we're able to keep that extra money. Then there's the meals and incidental stipend. That's also tax-free. Both of those things, the housing and the meals and incidentals, is set by the government. There's a website called the GSA website, and this is where the government tells our agencies the maximum amount they can give us for housing and meals. And that's going to be different depending on where we go, because if you're going to go work in San Francisco, then of course you're going to get a bigger housing stipend than you would in some place in Texas, because the cost of living is very different. Then there's travel reimbursements to get you from point A to point B. That's going to be tax-free money. And then you have your medical insurance, other reimbursements, bonuses, perks, benefits. Those are all part of your pay rate. So then let's look at the little blue pro tip I have over here. You're going to want to have your recruiter give this information to you in a format that is an hourly wage format, because that is how you're actually going to be able to compare packages. Let me try to explain this using an example. So let's say there are two nurses, and these nurses have two different recruiters and two different companies, but they have the exact same job, and they start at the exact same time. And after a few weeks, one nurse, we'll call her Sarah, is in the break room with Jack, and they're talking about their pay packages. And Sarah ends up telling Jack that she's making $45 an hour, and Jack is only making $42 an hour. And so Jack goes home that day, and he is so mad. He thinks, oh, I have the worst recruiter in the world. I can't even believe I got screwed over. But then what they did not talk about is all these other things that go into their pay packages. We don't know what Jack or what Sarah got for her travel reimbursement. Potentially, Sarah takes her own medical insurance and takes it out like I do. Maybe she got a few more dollars an hour because she wasn't taking the company's medical insurance. Or maybe Sarah moved from a lot farther, or maybe Jack moved from a lot farther away and needed a lot bigger travel reimbursement to get from point A to point B, and so he's making less an hour. So really the only way to compare packages is to look at everything that's in that package, and then compare what the hourly wage would be if you added it all up and divided it by those hours. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so that moves us right into negotiations. Negotiations, I feel like a lot of people think are pretty scary to do. And I completely agree. It is definitely a skill set to negotiate. But what's very cool about traveling is we get a new chance every 13 weeks to practice our negotiation skills, which is awesome. These are skills that we can keep for life. So number one, I'm going to say, don't feel guilty just because you like your recruiter. You absolutely should like your recruiter. Recruiters a lot of times become our good friends, but negotiations should happen. So just because you like your recruiter, don't feel like you can't negotiate the bill rate, the amount of money you're getting. Number two, talk to more than one company. Different agencies out there actually can receive completely different bill rates, that initial amount of money at the beginning. So it's not personal. We really, really do appreciate our recruiters. They work so hard for us. So we always want to be honest with them and communicate so well with them and be very respectful back. But we want to do what's best for us. And a good recruiter is also going to want us to do what's best for us. And so talking to more than one company is the best way for us to make the most money and get the most job opportunities. So there's definitely no problem in you talking to more than one company and then comparing different pay packages between the two. Just don't pin them against each other. At least for me, I personally do not like going back and forth between two companies and trying to get them to up their money because I feel icky about it. But I don't feel bad about having different companies give me their best pay package and then comparing those two. And then the third tip is just to make sure you get everything in writing. In our world, negotiation is way more than money for us. We negotiate when our start days are, we negotiate our times off, we negotiate our extra time and our overtime rates. That's specifically for nurses, our shift schedules, our floating schedules, if we're going to float or not. All of that is part of our negotiations for assignments. So whatever you agree on, especially if you're just talking about it verbally on your interview or with your recruiter, make sure that goes into the contract and is signed. Because if it's not written down and it's not signed, it might as well have never been agreed on in the first place. Okay, so now we're going to talk about recruiters. Where are all these awesome and honest recruiters out there? How do I find them? Great question. Okay, so there's a few different ways that people end up finding a recruiter typically. One, There is a lot of lead generation sites out there. And so you might fill out a form on a lead generation site. A lot of times people do this on accident. I definitely did, and I ended up changing my phone number because of it. Because after you fill that out and press send, your email address and phone number and name is going to go out to so many companies, and suddenly your phone is going to blow up. I don't know, has that happened to any of you guys as well? That is one way that recruiters can get a hold of you. Two, you can cold call companies yourself. So that's kind of like fingers crossed you get a good one that answers. Three is one of the better ways. If you can get a recommendation from someone you trust, that's usually a great way to find a recruiter, to already have kind of someone that says they're doing a great job. And then the fourth way is nomadicare.com. So that's my personal passion project. So one of the things I do is I personally interview recruiters, and they have to pass my test in order to make my list, which honestly not many people do. I think I'm at about a 20% pass rate right now for people making my list. But if you go there and put in your information, you get matched with 2 recruiters. So it's not even companies that I'm interviewing. It's like personal recruiters that I can stand behind and think they do a great job, and you'll get matched with 2 that I trust from that website. Okay, so how do you know if a recruiter is good or not? Let's say someone recommends a recruiter to you, or you do decide to start cold calling companies. What are you even looking for? And this is something I will give you a free bonus at the end to help you with this. But one thing is they should definitely be friendly and confident. So this is going to be something you're going to get a gut reaction to right at the start. Their tone of voice is going to tell you a lot about them. You're going to get a feel for if they're genuine. And the most important thing here is, are they someone you feel comfortable with? You want to make sure you feel completely comfortable asking them any questions you have, no matter how silly you feel like the question is, or feel completely comfortable telling them what you want and what you don't want. And a lot of that comes from how friendly and open they feel when you first start talking to them. Number 2, honesty and transparency. This one can be really hard if you're just getting started, because you're still learning so much about the industry, and it's really hard for you to know who's being honest and who's not being honest. So I totally get that. But what you can do to help yourself with this is ask them challenging questions and just get a gauge of how transparently they answer these questions. So you can ask them something as general as, what is the downside to travel? And see if they'll really tell you the flip side to it, because it's not all great. It's not absolutely for everybody. And if they're a good recruiter, they're going to be super honest with you about the life of traveling, because they're going to want you to travel only if it's really what's best for you. You can also ask them to explain what bill rates are to you, and ask them if they allow you to have, or if they're okay with you talking to more than one recruiter, or if they're okay with you negotiating pay, and just listen to how they answer these questions. The most important thing with this is you just want to feel like you are a team and that you can trust them. 3, the responsiveness. You can look for clues of this right at the start. If they're not writing you back quickly, then I wouldn't even bother. There are a lot of great recruiters out there, and you definitely don't want to have to just be waiting around to hear from a recruiter. So if they're starting out that pattern when they're supposed to be impressing you and wooing you, that's not a good sign. Knowledgeable. So there are some recruiters out there that are so nice and so friendly. But the blind can't lead the blind, and it's a huge learning curve. Recruiters also have to learn all of these things too in order to guide us. So if you're a brand new traveler, you're really going to want someone that understands this industry, and that way they can walk you through it. So you can also test this knowledge by asking them questions about, what is a tax zone? What are housing tips that you have? Explain to me bill rates. And they should be able to guide you through this very clearly. So if you're coming out the other side of this with more questions than you have answers, and things are even more confusing, or they give you really vague or general answers, that's a sign they just don't really understand. Number 5, amazing listener and communicator. So this is a hard skill to learn, I think. But the really great recruiters almost have this intuitive sense of what you're really saying and thinking, even underneath your words. So they're really good at reading your tone of voice and asking you questions, so they really understand what excites you about travel, why you want to travel, what your fears are, so they can really help guide you to those jobs that are the jobs that you really, really want. It is super important that you feel heard and that you feel understood by your recruiter, because they're the one that's going to be guiding you. 6, non-pushy, period. If you don't want a job, if your gut doesn't feel right about something, that's great, that's fine. You should never, ever feel pressure from your recruiter to take any job that you don't want. And then hard worker. The recruiters that go out of their way, go the extra mile, and work really hard will get you the better jobs that you want and the better pay rates. So that is my list of what makes a really solid recruiter. And then, okay, the red flags. Dun, dun, dun. The things to look out for that will help you know if you have maybe not such a good recruiter. So if a recruiter ever submits you to a job without your explicit approval, that is never okay. Submitting to a job means giving a job your resume. You should always give permission for a recruiter to do this. If a recruiter won't answer your questions before they get your resume, that's a huge red flag to me that they are really about the sale, and they're not really concerned about this long-term relationship that they're going to end up having with you. So if they're pushing you to get a resume in these first few conversations and that's all they keep bringing up and they won't really answer the questions till you get that to them, then also just walk away. There's plenty of recruiters that will take the time with you before they get that. If they offer a low taxable wage, under $18 an hour, for me personally, again, that's a personal decision I make. I don't like that. To me, that's a red flag. So I'll walk away from that. And if you're wondering why a company would even do that, it's because on their end, if they're paying less money in the taxable part of the wages, then their agency gets to pay less in payroll taxes on their side too. So they're saving money. But to me, it's kind of like cutting corners, and to me, it's obvious it's not what the IRS is telling us to do when they're at $14 and $12 an hour. So I walk away from that. If they don't do what they say they're going to do, if they can't explain to you what things are, like a tax home, like we said in the last slide, if they ever withhold information from you until after submittal, if they tell you they don't know what the pay is or something like that, and then if they make you feel guilty for negotiating with them, or if they make you feel guilty for talking to other recruiters, to me that is a lack of maturity, and it's silly. They might be a great friend, an incredible recruiter, but if they really want what's best for you, they're going to want you to talk to other recruiters too to make sure you're getting the best job out there. And they're going to work super hard to make sure they're the one that's going to get that for you as well. Okay, so the Nomadic list of approval. Nomadicare, that is my passion project. I am so excited about it. It's so much fun, and it's my way of helping you. So everybody that's on my Nomadic list of approval, all the recruiters, have been interviewed by me personally. About 20 of them have passed my test, so only about 1 in 5 recruiters that I interview actually make it on my list. But if they do, then I have decided that they have all these things that I've just talked about. But the cool thing about it is that I use your feedback to help keep this list super full of integrity, and that is because if I recommend somebody to you, then I always ask you for your feedback. And if a recruiter ends up not upholding these things that I just talked about out in the real world, they just interviewed really great, then I will just remove them from the list at any time. So this is a way for me to help new travelers really get linked with people, up with recruiters that are doing awesome things out there. So there's 2 things you can do to be a part of Nomadicare. If you already have a recruiter that is just incredible, please refer that recruiter to me. I would love to interview them. If you don't and you're still looking, then I will refer to you just 2 recruiters. And then I'll also send your way a guide and a list of questions so you know what to ask and what to do when you get linked in with those recruiters. And what I'll also do is put up the link where you can go if you want to get connected to one. And then now we can do questions and answers. So whatever questions you have, please feel free to write them to me now, and I'll answer as many as I can. All right, I'm going to see what questions are already up here. Jennifer switched from her iPad to her phone, and now it's working. I'm sorry it wasn't working very well, Jennifer. I don't know why that was. Michelle wants to do medical missions. Very cool. Nancy has an RV. Awesome. Okay, let me see if I can get to questions. Elizabeth asks, what happens if you travel to some place in the same state as your tax home? Elizabeth, that could be totally fine. When I lived in Texas, Texas is so big, right? So my tax home was in Texas for a while. And when it wasn't there, I could still travel in Texas as long as it was far enough away that I actually needed a separate house. So my tax home started out in Dallas. And when it was in Dallas, I could have definitely gone to Austin or to Lubbock, Texas if I wanted to go back there, or to any place that I needed to get a new home and still work in Texas. That's totally fine. Elizabeth said, how do you know? I'm not exactly sure what you mean by that, Elizabeth. Please elaborate, and I'll be happy to answer. Nancy says, I don't have a mortgage. Will DL, etc. be enough for a tax home? Do you mean driver? Is DL mean driver's license? Nancy, let me know what DL means, and I will answer that. But, oh, do you mean like you don't have a mortgage, so is your home paid off? Is that what you're saying? Let's see. Is 14 an hour acceptable for PTAs? Oh, great question, Birdie. Yes, I'm glad you asked that. So what I've heard for PTAs is 14 to 15 is acceptable, is what people have told me. All right, Karen, can I travel more than a year and still have a tax home? I understand I can't. Yeah, you can definitely travel. I've traveled for 6 years and still have a tax home. The only thing is, in that list of things I said, you can't stay somewhere else for more than a year. So let's say my tax home was in Dallas, and then I was in San Francisco, and I worked for over 12 months. Now all of a sudden my tax home just switched to San Francisco. So I cannot do that. Because if that happens, and I can't prove that I didn't have the intention, I could potentially have to pay back all of those tax-free stipends that they gave me while I was in San Francisco. So it's really important for your tax home not to switch to a place that you were getting tax-free stipends. So you can definitely travel for more than a year, absolutely, and still have a tax home. You just have to keep moving is the thing, and you just have to go home sometimes so you're not abandoning your actual tax home. Shannon says, does anyone have trouble getting loans with a traveling job versus a permanent job? Okay, so the thing about getting loans, Shannon, that's an awesome question. So when someone typically is looking at you to say, will I give you a loan, like for a house or for a car or for anything, the only thing they're going to look at is going to be your taxable income. So these people that are making $10 to $14 taxable an hour, that's also going to make it super hard for people to give them loans. So yes, that's why it's also good to have kind of that $20 an hour taxable wage, because that's what people are going to look at depending on how much they're going to give us. So people could definitely have trouble getting the loans they want. When you said no to the company that asked you to get unethical minutes, what happened? Did you switch jobs? Yes. So in my 5+ year of traveling, that's the only contract I did cut short myself. So first I went to my manager and I just said I was not comfortable with it and that I needed to protect my license, and I told her what I was comfortable with, but she did not want that. She wanted me to get the hours that she was giving me, those over 1,000 hours a day. So essentially it just was not a good fit. I didn't agree that that was okay with me to do that. And so I did end up cutting that contract short and leaving. And then, yep, I just went and got another job in the same area. There was just another job down the road that I got, and that one was much, 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 much better. Nancy says yes. Oh, yeah. Okay, Nancy. Oh, so you have paid off your home, so you don't have a mortgage. Congratulations. That's amazing. So will it be enough for a tax home? That is a really, really good question, Nancy. I'm inclined to say it's still your tax home. You're still paying taxes on it. I don't know the answer to that well enough to give you the best answer. I'll say I think recruiters should know the answer to that. Or the best place to go, honestly, if you're concerned about tax home stuff, someone that actually is a CPA, there's a website called traveltax.com, and it's a guy named Joseph Smith, and he's kind of like the travel tax guru of our industry. You could write him. He's very good about answering questions from travelers. And he could tell you the answer to that. I don't want to tell you wrong is the only thing. Gail says, do you worry about retirement? I'm a lot older this time, closer to retirement age. Right, and so you're worried about if you're making less money, then less money will go into Social Security and things like that. Is that right, Gail? I think that is definitely something that you can negotiate. So you can figure out what it is that you want to make. And there are companies out there that will allow you to have a much higher taxable wage and to adjust kind of that pay package that's special for you to make sure you're getting what you need and taking care of retirement in that way. Elizabeth says, on your recruiter. How do you know on your recruiter? Can they call you since I'm new to this? How do you know on your recruiter? Can they call you since I'm new to this? I'm so sorry, Elizabeth. I'm still not quite sure what you're asking. On your recruiter, can they call you? I'm sorry. I'm not sure what that means. Okay, Jerry says, should a recruiter give you concrete numbers for pay before an interview or just an idea? No, a recruiter should definitely be able to break down that pay package for you before the interview. You can do all your negotiations and have an understanding of pretty much exactly what you're going to make before the interview happens. The things that they won't know is how much you're claiming on your taxes. They're not going to know, how much is going to be taken out of the taxable income because that changes for each person depending on what their deductions are and things like that. But besides that, absolutely, you can know that before you interview. Andrea has read that doing travel therapy helps qualify you for loan forgiveness programs for federal loans from grad school. Is this accurate? Ooh, that would be so awesome. I actually do not know about that. If anybody does, please tell me because I definitely have some student loans out there that I would love to be forgiven. But no, as far as I know, being a travel therapist doesn't help you qualify any more than anything else. But if someone knows something different, you should definitely share. Do my parents need to give a form to me to show I paid rent, or do I need to give them one so they can claim the income? So you guys just do that separately, Jennifer. So what you can do is just type up a pretty general form that is like a lease agreement saying you are renting this home or this room in their home for this much money, and you both just sign it and save a copy for yourselves. So they are going to get a check from you each month. So you can save a copy of that check for your own paper trail. They can save for their own paper trail. And then when it comes time to do taxes, they're just going to claim that money that they made as income on their taxes. So yeah, that's all it is. It's just a lease that you guys would sign together, and then you just keep your checks, a receipt of your check. Okay, Mary says, so I'm turning 26 this week. Happy birthday, Mary. I am now having to purchase insurance. Oh, right, yep. I was just quoted $327 for Blue Cross Blue Shield with a $2,400 deductible. I feel like this is insane. Do you have any suggestions on insurance companies, or how did you find your own insurance? So I did the Affordable Care Act. I just called up the Affordable Care Act in my state that I was in and talked to them about getting a health plan that would work across multiple states. And we just went over plans. I was on the phone with somebody, and we just went over plans for me. Now for me, since I don't have that many health issues, I have one that is more, I feel like mine is less than that. It's under $300 a month. But it does have a very high deductible because I said I wanted to pay less per month because I was not anticipating going to the hospital this year. It does stink. Insurance is not cheap. I'm so sorry about that. I really am not a huge fan of how our insurance works. Yeah, so is it possible to find an inexpensive insurance? I would hop on the phone with someone, Mary, from your state and ask them to walk through plans with you. That was much easier for me than trying to do it myself online. Cool. Yeah, and John says $327 a month is pretty good. Yeah, insurance is just expensive. Sarah says, do the recruiters you vetted also work with behavioral therapists and clinical social workers? Not that I know of, Sarah. What discipline are you? Are you a behavioral clinic therapist or a social worker? Do you know, Sarah, do you know, like, have friends in that industry that do this kind of travel work? Because I could be wrong. I guess in my experience, I had no clue that social workers could do this travel work. And if they can, that's awesome. And I will definitely ask my allied health recruiters if that is also in their scope. As far as I know right this second, I don't know, but I hope so. Okay, Elizabeth said, where I'm going is 80 miles each way, and I was going to commute. I was going to use it tax-free for my mortgage. If can't use it for my mortgage, do they add that amount into my base rate to increase the amount? Oh my gosh, you're going to commute 80 miles. That's a long commute. So how that works, Elizabeth, is you do have to be duplicating expenses in order to get tax-free money. So if you're just going to commute 80 miles each way and then go home, you can't get the tax-free money. So then what you would get is you might get a pay rate, and then everything will be taxed because you're not duplicating expenses. So in the IRS's eyes, you're not really a traveler. You're just someone that commutes very far away for work. So you might just want to like assess if there's a place that's close by, 80 miles away, that you can rent that's not that expensive, because you might end up ahead by actually staying the night somewhere close and like maybe going home on weekends or something, so you can get that tax-free benefit. But if you don't have two places and you can't prove that you are duplicating expenses, you cannot technically get that tax-free money. And Nancy says, thank you, I've been to his site. Yes, he's a nice guy. Mary says, thank you, Dawn. Okay, Elizabeth, can I have this new recruiter call you so you can, oh yeah, totally. Or either way, you can refer them to me. So if you go to nomadicare.com, you can refer that recruiter to me, and then in the comment section tell me like, hey, it's Elizabeth from your webinar. I just want you to let me know how this recruiter is doing. But I'd be happy to interview that recruiter and see if they're a good fit for Nomadicare. Absolutely, I'm definitely looking for more recruiters right now, so that would be great. Especially if you think they're great, if you have a hunch that they might be awesome, I'd love to interview them. Sarah, I have seen pictures of forums of recruiters giving gifts to their nurses. Ooh, Tiffany's jewelry, etc. Is this allowed? Should this be expected? So Sarah, no, this is not expected. This is definitely like an extra mile kind of thing. I think it is so nice when recruiters send little gifts. But the thing to remember too, it's kind of a catch-22. I don't know, everyone's going to have their own opinion of this, but remember when we talked about the pay packages? So the bill rate, and then there's your pay package. A lot of these companies actually take that money. Maybe they'll take $50 out of your total 13-week pay package, or $100 out of the total 13-week pay package. So that's actually your money they're using to buy you a gift. And even though they're so nice, they're such like unexpected sweet surprises. I personally love it when my recruiters do that. But as far as I understand from recruiters I've talked to, that is where the money comes from. The money is typically not coming from their cut, it's coming from your cut. That's how I understand it from recruiters. Of course, I've never been a recruiter, and different companies might work differently. But as far as I understand, I've had recruiters ask me, like, what's better, like, just giving you all the cash, or would you rather me keep some of that money to give you presents? And I think that's such a personal preference. Mary says, also, I've noticed with many recruiters, they want you to fill out all this mountains of paperwork and contact all the references before showing you pay packages for assignments. Is it unreasonable to ask for pay packages and breakdowns before? Yes, absolutely, Mary. Ask for it. Totally. Maybe not every agency will give it to you, but a lot of agencies will give it to you. And you're right. The paperwork is so much, and you don't want to exhaust your references just to see a pay package. So absolutely, I think you can ask for it, and a lot of companies will give you that pay package before, because they want you to get the full impression before you have to go through all that work. So yes. What if you pay for housing? It's way less than the stipend you get tax-free. Do you have to pay tax on the difference? No, you do not have to pay tax on the difference. So Karen asked, what if what you pay for the housing is way less than the stipend you get that's tax-free? Do you have to pay the tax on the difference? No, you don't pay tax on the difference. You keep that money into your business, like what house you get and what you pay for your housing. And that is the way that a lot of travelers make good money, is because they do find housing that's cheaper. And every single place I've ever gone, I found a house that's cheaper than the stipend. And I do that intentionally. Sometimes I live with roommates in places like San Francisco that's really expensive. And in some places it's lower cost of living, so I'll get my own place. But yeah, that's great. That's great if you can find housing that's cheaper than your tax stipend. Okay, so Marlo asked, does your rent have to be fair market value? What if it's less? Okay, so the thing is, if it's less, Marlo, what you're risking is, let's say you were to get audited, then, and let's say you were only paying like $10 to your parents to say that you were paying them rent, or $100, something that was less than the fair market. The IRS might just tell you, no, you were not actually duplicating expenses. If that happens, if you get audited and they determine that you were not duplicating expenses and you in fact should not have been getting tax-free stipends, you will have to pay those stipends back, which over time would add up to be a lot of thousands of dollars. So it's definitely safer to pay the fair market value. Even if it's on the lower side of fair market value, you need to be paying like an amount of money that someone might reasonably pay to live in a room. Mary said, thank you. You're welcome, Mary. Sarah, yes, I'm a clinical social worker. I honestly don't know, but I was hoping it is possible. I hope it is too. Sarah, I'm going to write that down right now, and I'm going to ask the recruiters I know if they know if that's possible. So Sarah, why don't you shoot me an email at laura@nomadicare.com, what's on the screen, and let me know, hey, I'm Sarah, I was a clinical social worker, and I'll get back to you and let you know what I find out. You mentioned traveling PAs. How does that work in terms of privileges and doctor-PA agreements? I honestly don't know because I don't know what a doctor-PA agreement is. But I do know PAs can travel, and their rules are very similar to nurse rules and traveling therapy rules. So all these things I just talked about today would apply to PAs as well. But since I don't know what a doctor-PA agreement is, I don't know about that. Andrea said, the recruiter I spoke to earlier today mentioned that some travelers will pay their parents rent, quote unquote, for a room, quote unquote, by a check, and then their parents will just give them back cash. But if they have to pay it in taxes yearly, that doesn't seem fair to them. Have you ever heard of this? Yeah, I have heard people talking about that. I don't know about, I mean, I guess all I can say, like, to be educating you guys right now and to be telling you how to do it, all I can really say is what is the right way to do it, right? I can only tell you, like, what the IRS expects and what I understand the rules to be. So these kind of, like, loopholes and things that, like, maybe aren't exactly the right way to do it, I guess I'm just not comfortable saying, like, yeah, it's okay to do that. Those are just personal decisions you have to make for yourself. But you're right, parents should technically be claiming it as income, and then because of that, it's income, they'll be paying like 20, I don't know, whatever their rate is, they'll be paying that amount of taxes on that income that they made on that. So some of that money would end up going to the government then as income. Michelle, how do I find the appropriate rent rate to give a family member to keep my tax home? Good question. So you can just hop on Craigslist and look up room rates in your area that your parents live and see what other people are paying to rent out one room in a house that is about your parents' size. And that will give you a good roundabout number that you can play with of what to use for your appropriate rent rate. Jennifer, is there a special tax person needed to do my taxes this year? How do I find one where I am contracted at the time? So the person that I know of that a lot of people use for their travel taxes is a man named Joseph Smith. And he used to be a traveler himself. He was a respiratory therapist traveler. And now he is a CPA, and he does travel taxes specifically for travelers because our taxes are really different than a normal person's because we have to file in every state we work as well as our tax home. So he kind of made himself like an expert in this area, and he's so knowledgeable. I've learned a lot from him. But his website is traveltax.com. And if you guys are part of my Facebook group, I'll put the link. I'm actually doing a joint webinar with him in 2 weeks, and he's going to go way more in depth with the tax stuff. I'm so excited about that. So let me go on here. I'm just going to get the link to the Facebook group in case you guys have not seen it yet, and that's where you can find when me and Joseph are going to be doing this. There it is. So I just put the link in the chat. That's when you guys can see when me and Joseph are going to be doing this joint one. Peggy, what's the story with completion bonus? Thoughts? I don't like completion bonuses personally because completion bonuses are taxed so much higher than your regular pay. I would much rather that money be put into my pay somewhere else rather than a completion bonus. So if I'm offered a completion bonus, I'll use that a lot of times as a negotiation to try to get it put somewhere else because I don't like how much they're taxed. For the tax-free money for food, can that be used for gas, etc.? Yeah, the tax-free money you get for food and incidentals, for meals and incidentals, that's just tax-free money you get that pays for these extra expenses for living away from your home. So absolutely, you can use it for gas and food and whatever. You don't have to keep your receipts. Like you can, that's just money you get for doing that. So you really can spend it on whatever you want to. Mary says, hey Sarah, I've worked with 2 different companies. While one was very nice and sent gifts all the time, the other company did not send gifts, but gives me much more money and better hours than the other. Cool. Very good insight. Thank you, Mary, for sharing that. And Sarah said, thanks, Mary. Cool. For info to pay your student loan, check out this site, salts.com. Cool. I don't know that one, Sarah. Or don't know that one, Elizabeth. Maybe I'll look at that. I've still got quite a few years to pay mine back. Mary, the first time I traveled, I honestly felt like I was tricked into working 48 hours a week for a 36-hour pay package. I literally went to the middle of nowhere, Nevada. The closest Walmart was 3 hours away. I went to Texas after that assignment and made more money for 36 hours a week. And it wasn't a critical needs area. Always talk to a second recruiter agency and don't get double submitted. Great advice. Thank you for sharing that, Mary. Gail says, why wouldn't you have to just pay taxes on any stipend rather than pay back the stipend if you weren't duplicating expenses? That's a great question. Gail, please come to the joint webinar with me and Joseph Smith. I know he's going to have such amazing insight. Bring all these tax questions, and I'm going to let him really answer these and give you guys the knowledge that comes from someone that actually does these taxes. I learned so much of my information from him, but I am not him. I don't have his brain yet, and so definitely come and listen to that one. I think he would be able to answer that one very well. Nancy says, can you explain crisis rates? So crisis rates are for nurses, typically. I have not seen a crisis rate for a therapist, but nurses talk about them a lot. So this bill rate that the hospital is giving out, if it's a crisis rate, it's going to be much, much more money because they're in crisis. They need nurses there now. So you can get paid very good money to do crisis. And as far as I know, I think they're less than 13 weeks. I think they're shorter assignments and a lot more money and potentially a lot of hours in 1 week. If you get tax-free stipends to cover food, does that mean you cannot write these items off on your taxes? That seems like it'd be double dipping. Sarah, awesome question. You're so right. So the tax-free stipends that you get, you do not write that stuff off again. You get that tax-free stipend, and the GSA, the government, pretty much says, as long as you're under this amount, then we'll give you this money, and that's fine. You don't have to give receipts. But if for some reason you were like, you know what, I'm spending a lot more money than what the stipend's giving me, you can write that stuff off, but then you would have to keep all of your receipts and prove that you were spending all that extra money. But no, typically you don't have to keep your receipts, and you don't write those items off on your taxes either. That's why you get this tax-free stipend. Is it true that you can claim, Mary says, is it true that you can claim the per diem rate on taxes? Claim the per diem rate on taxes. I don't quite know what you mean, Mary. I'm so sorry, I don't quite understand what you mean. Hi, Mary says, which is better, taking the company housing or finding my own? I think it totally, there are a lot of Marys on here. Hello, I think there's at least 3 Marys. So a big shout out to all the Marys that made it. So is it better to take your own house, to find your own housing, or take the company? I have always found my own housing, and I've really kind of enjoyed it. There's a lot of resources that I'll definitely do a webinar on in the future just about housing and resources and ways to find good housing. But I've always found my own, and I always found places that were cheaper than the stipend, which I really enjoy. But I think it just is up to you. If you're not as worried about making as much money and you would rather relieve the pressure and have your company put you in a furnished place, then, that can be really nice to relieve some of that responsibility and that stress. But you're not going to make as much money if you do that. Gail said, I even kept Joseph Smith after I stopped traveling in 2009. He's amazing. I agree, Gail. I think he is incredible. I love that we have him. Elizabeth said a crisis rate is like a strike. Yeah, it would be similar to like a strike rate. Hospitals like nurses go on strike, similar thing. You could get a lot of money for going in and helping them. And then it looks like we have one last question, unless another one comes in. Elizabeth says, do you recommend staying in an apartment or extended stay? This is for an 8 to 12 weeks. It completely depends what you find. So extended stays are always a great fallback for me. I've never stayed in one more than a week or two when I'm looking for another place. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll backwards search Craigslist. So I'll post my own post on Craigslist in the spot I want to live, and I'll introduce myself and kind of explain what I do and tell people my situation, like I'm only here for this long, I'm a non-smoker, this and this, professional, and just kind of show my personality a bit. And then typically I get responses from Craigslist, and people are offering places to me. So that tends to work pretty well in places for me. So I think it's up to you. An extended stay can be really easy though. But I typically look for a place first and then fall back on extended stays. So Elizabeth, have you ever worked for a company that will give you a car, a phone, a computer for a home health job? Yeah, I've worked a home health job before, and the company issued out a computer and a phone for me because that was part of my job. So not the agency, the actual home health company I was working for issued that stuff out to me on my first day that I turned in on my last day. A car, I think not very many agencies are doing cars anymore. And if they do, just remember that comes out of your own pay. So that would be in those pots that we talked about, like they took their 25% profit. You have your 75% pot left of your pay rate. If you got a car, that would come out of your 75%. So that would be your money essentially paying for that car. Jerry, if I have an apartment in my tax home and sublet, does it still qualify for the rule? So if I have an apartment as your tax home and you sublet it, you still have to have a space in your apartment that is yours. So you could definitely sublet like a room. You could sublet part of it, but you would still technically have to have a room that has your stuff that is yours, technically, for it to still be your tax home. Gail says the audio is cutting out again. I'm so sorry about that the audio keeps cutting out on this one. I hope it's been mostly good. Cool. Good. Jennifer says, definitely want to go to the tax webinar. Yes, you all should come. I'm so excited about that one. Shannon says, awesome webinar. Thank you. You are welcome. I'm so glad you all came. I hope you learned a lot. I hope it was helpful. Please reach out to me by email if you have any questions. And let me know if you guys know of awesome recruiters or need awesome recruiters. And I'm going to keep doing these. So join the Facebook group, and we'll keep having guests come on to deep dive into different topics, and then I'll keep doing these beginner ones for new people that want to know the basics. But it's so good. I'm glad a lot of people came. Sarah says, thank you so much for doing this, Laura. Your information is super helpful. Thank you, Sarah. And Mary said, wow, I'm learning a lot. Thank you, guys. And Elizabeth says, do many different companies carry the same jobs? Yes, absolutely, Elizabeth. A lot of different companies have the exact same jobs, but remember, they might actually have different bill rates for the exact same jobs. And then different companies will have their own separate jobs too. Jerry said it answered a lot of my questions. Awesome. Marlo, Laura, thank you. I'm glad you came, Marlo. Good to see your name pop up. Elizabeth, thanks. You are sweet. Thank you. Thanks, Andrea. Shelby, thank you so much for the information. We will be looking forward to future webinars. I have many friends that would learn a lot too. Cool. I will definitely be posting when I do more. Thank you, Shelby. Awesome. Thank you for all the love, everybody. It makes me feel great. Cool. Well, this was so much fun. And yeah, I'm going to sign off now, but you guys know how to get a hold of me and join the Facebook group, and I will definitely be doing more webinars soon. So best of luck to you all. All right. Bye, guys.